that we don't even know we're hypervigilant, you know? But
Mm.
this is the reality. Like a nervous system that's hypervigilant, um, this a rigidity in thinking, the black, white, either or, this, that worldview, a real fear of conflict, all the hallmarks of supremacist culture. And it was so interesting, this book, I think I've told you about maybe you've read it, The Conflict is Not Abuse.
No, it's been on my reading list for a while.
Good.
Sarah Schulman. Yeah.
She draws this parallel between the behavior of people who are traumatized and people who are in the thralls of a supremacist worldview.
Right.
And she's like, it's the same. It's the same. It shows up the same because there's such a fragile sense of self in both of them. There's such a fear of being obliterated by the other, by difference, that a lot of the same behaviors appear. And so I feel like, I don't know if it's a wheel of like trauma and supremacy and trauma, and, you know, or how this goes, but there definitely seems to be some connection. And I think for white people, there's a cultural trauma that's now shown up as a certain level of uptightness and need to control. And, you know, I read this piece by a Harold Cardinal, who was a Cree fellow in Alberta. He was quoting somebody else, but he was talking about, so, you know, when white people enter a new environment, they tend to start adjusting things. Like there's the supercut of Donald Trump that everyone should see, where when he sits down, he just starts like, he's just got to move a cup over, and he just starts adjusting thing on his desk wherever he sits. And he's like, this is what white people do. They come into a new space, they get very busy trying to control or move the environment. Whereas when an indigenous person would walk into an environment, they would get really still, and you would think they were scared or frozen, but they're actually just absorbing kind of what's happening, what's polite, what do I touch, what don't I touch, you know, how is it here? And it's so funny. So, you know, it's just that, but I think that the need to adjust things is a certain level of hypervigilance.
Yeah, did you mention like the Donald Trump video of Donald Trump adjusting stuff?
It's amazing. Donald Trump, adjusts things or moves things, and everyone should watch it. But because it's a case study to me in whiteness, you know, and what does it do?
And when you're adjusting,
just show up and be a guest. You know?
And when you're adjusting things, where's my connection? Hold on. When you're adjusting things that are people, that gets really sketchy.
That's interesting.
You know, well, I mean, that's it, right? Adjusting like people wanting to adjust my viewpoint, or adjusting experts' viewpoint, or getting people there or there. Adjusting for, I think that's actually part of like what feels bad. That's what like racial like tokenizing is like, right? It's like, oh, there's this channel that's really loud and it's like black people, so let's just turn this channel down it's an adjustment for the sake of the white system. It's not authentic often.
I don't want to adjust your words. I just want to adjust your tone. You can just be nicer.
Well, that's one. Yeah, there's a thing there. I think though, like I get into that. Like definitely, the subject around tone policing is an interesting one, because I think that's actually a really interesting place, because wanting to adjust it, how do you ask somebody? I think maybe perhaps there's a lack of vulnerability, and like, hey, you're yelling at me, stop yelling at me, as opposed to like, this is how this makes me feel.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when you're in a relationship, I think it's reasonable to ask like, hey, this is how I feel when you're like saying things in an X way, and it might have nothing to do with you, but this is how it makes me feel. There isn't a lot of that. There's just like okay, you need to shut up. There's something about, I think there's privilege and dynamics like definitely create an additional layer of complexity in terms of how to deal with different situations in the relationship. But
yeah, and it's interesting, if I were to talk to a white man about tone policing, I feel like my basic message would be, look, stay in your business. Stay in your business.
Right.
Like, your business is how you process what they said. Their business is how they say it.
Right.
That to start from this orientation of, if I could just get them to say it nicer, then everything will be okay, which is a kind of madness in a way, because I mean, and I'm sure you've seen it.
Yeah.
I know I've seen it. A white person will come to me devastated with what a person of color has said to them. And maybe I witnessed, or maybe I just hear the account from them.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time, my feeling at the end of it is like, they were so nice to you.
Right.
You have no idea how much they were holding back. You got like 5% of the rage that they were feeling. And even that destroyed you. And so now you're wanting to like close the spigot even more. So my, encouragement for white men around this would be, yeah, there's going to be rage, and it doesn't mean don't set boundaries or don't take care of yourself.
Yeah.
But can you do that without making them wrong?
Yes. Yeah. We talked about that, right? Yeah.
They did something wrong, and it was their fault, and that's why you're feeling this way. But just like, oh, okay, wow, blam, my circuits are blown. I can no longer be present in this conversation, but not their fault. It's just, I'm noticing what my capacity is right now, and I'm over the limit, so I can't actually be here.
And we talked about not making yourself wrong either.
Amen. Oh, right. Don't make yourself wrong for short-circuiting. But it's good to know. It's good to just notice, like, wow, okay, I really hit a limit in that conversation where suddenly I wasn't even in the room. I was listening to it,
Totally.
And then you go, and then,
yeah.
I would say for a white man, it's like, yeah, now go sit with it.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, sit with me. Let's process it. Let's unpack, because it wasn't what they said that's impacting you. It's what it meant to you. So I would want to sit down with them and say, okay, so they said all these things. Now, here's a blank piece of paper, and just finish the sentence. Them saying those things means what? And fill in that blank as many times as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Because what they'd probably fill it in with something like, means they're the racist ones. It means it's hopeless. It means we're never going to build a bridge. It means I'm a monster. It means,
right.
All these things would come up. And then I'd want to sit with them and work through every single one of those.
Huh.
And when those were cleaned up, I said, great, you're probably ready for round 2 of the conversation.
Right.
But it's to, and not to make ourselves wrong. Like, exactly. It's like, of course you would react that way. Because if all those things were true, if a person of color blowing up at you meant that you were a monster, if that was really true, you should be upset. One day you look at you, oh God, I'm actually a flesh-eating monster.
Yeah.
If you really realize you were, who wouldn't be terrified by that? But it's not true, or it's at least worth questioning. If it's true. And but I know, like we talked about last time, so few spaces for that kind of processing to happen. And so when it's like nobody gets a chance to process, it just builds and builds and builds.
Totally.
And then we're somehow surprised that it comes out as an explosion. And do people of color have a safe space to really process what they're feeling and get heard and not be made wrong, just vent? And do white people have a space where they can share and not be made wrong and heard, just to even discharge the emotions and to start to work through their thoughts about it?
Yeah.
So that they can come back, okay, hey, I'm fresh. I'm ready to talk.
Yeah, that's totally the regulation issue, right? The community regulation. And that's one thing I just finished an article post about, like, how do you set boundaries as a white person? And like the heart of it is like, the boundaries are not just about you saying no. So I think there's a bit of I don't actually relate to modern boundary work in the same way that other people do, because I try to decolonize everything. So I'm not interested in using like a Western psychotherapeutic frame, but I look at it in terms of like Tai Chi or like Aikido and relational practices that are about conflict, but about solving the conflict somatically in a way that discharges the situation, and done through nervous system regulation. But boundaries are just really about separating you from the other person. I think the word boundary sometimes gets a bit risky because we're talking about not letting somebody in, But it's also actually, when you have boundaries, that means also your emotions aren't spilling out to the other side either, right? You're not intruding on the other person. So it's kind of like knowing your own place. And I think framing it that way, it allows to like, I think I don't know about boundaries necessarily, because I'm trying to get away from language, but white folks knowing who they are and what the other person is and what their emotions are and what the emotions of the other person is, whose needs are being met, whose needs are wanting to be met, like knowing who they belong to is really valuable, because it allows for that separation. And sometimes we need to do it completely away from each other, but being able to do it while we're still present, I think that's my goal, you know. And I definitely hear about, like, to do that, like, you first have to not make yourself wrong either. When I talk to most white people, like, it's not that they're like, they struggle with, ultimately, a lot of the people I talk to, they're not like, oh, I know this person of color is not wrong, but they still feel like they're wrong inside because they haven't given themselves for them to not be wrong. And I've noticed when I create the proposition, maybe it's okay for you to be angry that somebody's calling you out. It's okay for you to feel those emotions. And they're like, oh, okay, I am actually angry. And I was like, what's that about? And they're like, usually like, I don't want to have to be perfect. I was like, what's that about? They're like, that's about capitalism. I was like, don't project that shit. You know, don't project that need for protection, you know, that fear of capitalism, that's anger towards it, onto people of color. Let's not do that. You know, but it's interesting. The first step, though, actually is to be like, actually, it's okay that you're feeling overwhelmed. It's okay. You know, anger is a sign that you're feeling overwhelmed. It's okay. It's not wrong. And then there's like a space of like, oh, I'm not actually angry at people of color. I'm angry at the system that I'm in, which is appropriate to be angry at. It's like, yes, we're all angry at it. Like, So that's been really interesting to see.
That's beautiful. Old man Hargrave's just going to think on this for a second.
Okay.